Welcome to the Seriously series as we are looking at the mound. We're talking about how it is that we tend to sweep things under the proverbial carpet, or in our case, the lawn. And we're talking about how these things are the things that we very often like to sort of hide, and they can cause a whole lot of shame and deterioration of the inner life. Because we've been talking about it, I'm sort of always thinking about, how this shows up and what shows up in my own life and things like that. It's been interesting. It's been interesting, kind of looking for patterns, in those kind of darker places, the recesses of your heart. So a couple of instances happened over the last week or so. One of them, me and the boys have gotten into archery lately. And so we signed up at an archery range out in Suffolk, and we go out there every once in a while, and we just, they got a big range and targets and stuff. Well, there's a place where you go, you kind of sight in your equipment. And so it's all very equal, meaning the people that you're shooting with, you all are shooting from the same place, and you're shooting targets at the same distance. This happened to be a 30-yard target that I was working on. Now, I have a bow that a friend loaned me, and it's amazing. It's got the best in all of the new technology. It's got this super sophisticated sight. It's got all of this power. It's a compound bow, very sophisticated, very high quality piece of equipment. And so I line up. I'm new at it, and I keep firing, and I'm hitting the target. I'm just not getting it in the middle. It's just not like kind of getting where it was supposed to be. Well, the guy next to me is an older guy. He's working with this piece of garbage recurve bow, and he doesn't have a sight on it or anything. Like he's got to see the target with his eyes or something. Like it's just, I don't even know how you work with this thing. It's like and so he steps up. He's got these crummy little arrows, and he's like, I'm like, okay. So he's clustering at the same distance that I'm not. So here I am wondering, how it is that, the guy behind me, he sees that I'm using this great bow, and he said to me, kind of reassuring me time and again, he's like, you really do have a good piece of equipment there. It really is a good bow. I'm like, I know, just not in my hands. I know it's a good bow, just knock it off, It's like, so here I am, all right, that's then a week or so later, I am taking a course with Joel, my older son, and we are finishing up this course, and there's a test after it. Now, I'm not a competitive sort, but I got a 98 on the test, which I thought was, pretty impressive, because I worked on it, I studied, and so I got a 98 on the test, and so of course immediately I start looking around. Hey, what'd you guys get? How'd it go? Hey, how'd it go? The guy in front of me, he's all boisterous. He's like, hey, man, I got a 96, hey, yeah, that's pretty good. He's like, oh, what'd you get? I'm like, oh, 98, and then we were in these metal chairs for so long that my butt hurt. So I got up and I went, go stand while they were kind of tabulating. And I stood at the place where I could see where everybody put their tests down. So I could see what everybody else got. Because, of course, I just wanted to know if anyone got, because the 98's irrelevant if everybody else got hundreds. And so I just wanted to know how many, and did. So I'm watching each of these go down, and just, fine, 92 and 96. I'm like, oh, you did pretty good, and all this, until the guy drops the 100 down. He drops 100 down. I'm like, 100? What, you got no life? How in the world could you get 100? What, did you study all week? How could you do that? I'm busy. I'm trying to run a church. And what are you getting 100 over here? It's like you probably have nothing else to do with your life. So what is that at work in my life? What is it? Those two scenarios. Yeah, jealousy, envy. It's the desire for the good that someone else has. I'm sure most of you don't struggle with it, but I've prepared a little bit of a quiz to see if any of these scenarios have ever happened to you. So you decide to go out to dinner with a friend. So out of your mound, you pull that menu of the place that you wanted to go to, and you haven't seen them for a while, and so you're sitting down to have a nice, enjoyable dinner. And as you're ordering your chow fun, you are hearing about your friend's spectacular life. You're hearing about all of the great things that have been going on. You're hearing about advancements at work, and you're hearing about new toys that they've purchased, and you're hearing relationships that are really going well for them, and just how the sun just shines brighter in their life. And after 2 hours of this, you go home feeling worse about yourself. Worse about yourself. How is it that that happens? Maybe that's not anything that you've ever experienced. Maybe instead, you noticed your neighbor, he pulls up in a shiny new car, and it's pretty. It's not a Matchbox. It's a real one, and it's got all the little gadgets and all the little technologies, all the improvements, all the stuff that your car doesn't have. And after, you spend a few minutes listening to them extol that, oh, this is so fantastic, it's a beautiful little thing. After that, you find yourself within even, an hour or so on the internet, crunching numbers. I wonder how much that thing cost. I wonder if it's up for when does my lease come up? I wonder if I could put $2,000 down, what would my payments be? With gas, the price it is, I might be able to save the amount. Maybe, and suddenly you're in there, you're checking it out because, it's great that they got it. You're really happy, and it really seems right that you should get it as well. Now, you may say I'm not nearly so, materialistic as something like that. And so for you, just picture this as that achievement award that they give out at work that, you hang in your cubicle or your office or wherever This one isn't. This is the honor roll for one of my kids. So impressive. But imagine that it's the work. Imagine it's the work thing. It's that little certificate they give when the person who is working really hard and doing really well and hitting their top sales quotas and all that, it's the promotion that they got. You know the one, your promotion, the one that you were supposed to get. It's actually a little bit curious how they got all of the recognition for your hard work. It's hard to figure out how that even took place. I mean, if they knew that how much of the weight of the office that you carried as to what would enable them to do so well and to get that promotion, if you had only been recognized for what. So you start to see this resentment build in your own heart. Maybe it has to do with your professional advancement or lack thereof. You could see from, what most of us like to do, though, is not experience these things up close. We like to voyeuristically peer into the lives of the people around us and just sort of look off into the distance, which these actually work. Hey, Irene, you're sleeping. So, there. So these things sort of, this is the way that we, these don't have to be people you know. Do you ever notice that you can be envious of people that you don't even know? They could be strangers to you, but you could just peer in through the metaphorical windows of their home and sort of see what's been happening, and you look around and you wonder and you sort of wish and you ask, why them? Why them? I don't really know them, but maybe you do, but why them and not me? We start to ask those kinds of questions. How come they're getting the status or the recognition or the enjoyment of life or the contentment or the great relationships? How come it's them and not me? And you get this feeling that kind of wells up inside you where why not me? I need those sorts of things. It doesn't take much. It could even be family members. You can go to one of your family parties, and you could see that your sister has squeezed into a very tiny pair of jeans. And you can sort of, when she quietly, you're not saying anything, of course, because it's your sister, you want to be nice to her. And so, she kind of like goes off and you say like, man, she looks really good in those things. You kind of see them from behind. These are actually called hot bottoms. Like hot bottom jeans. Like, this is it, right? You're like, we have the same DNA. How come I don't understand, We start to have this. If this has ever happened to you, if you have ever measured yourself by the success of another person, if you have ever felt inferior because of the status or of the wealth or of the recognition or of the relationships that some people have around you, if maybe you have tried to attach yourself to someone so that you could take the benefit or experience the benefit of the blessings that have been poured out on them, or if maybe you decide to deal with it in a different way, belittling those around you, trying to explain away their success in comparison to your hardship. If you've ever experienced that, then maybe you have been bitten by this thing we call envy. Maybe you have experienced the sting of it. When the scriptures talk about envy, the Bible teaches us that a way for the human heart to begin to make progress against this is we say that desiring the desires of God, rather than the delights of this world, expels envy. This is what the Bible teaches us. Desiring the desires of God. Do you like that? Because I worked really hard on that sentence. I thought it was really good. Desiring, and if you're a note taker, you might want to write this down because we're going to unpack it a little bit. Desiring the desires of God, rather than the delights of this world, expels envy. We're going to pull this apart a little bit. We're going to start with the delights of the world section of it. We're going to start with that. Because the Bible says that desiring the delights of this world is foolish. In fact, worse than foolish. Open up, if you would, in the Bible to 1 John chapter 2. And you can leave it open there for the remainder of the morning here, because we're going to be in this small passage. 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 15. John says, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. Do not love the world or anything in the world." Which is sort of interesting to me, because, how? What else is there except the things in this world? The status, the relationships, the simple delights, all of the things that we sort of take for granted around us, the enjoyments, the entertainment, the food, the drink. I mean, don't enjoy anything, don't love anything in the world? For John, he speaks about this realm of the world and everything in it as it stands in opposition to God. And for many of us, it does seem it's natural to desire these things. It's normal. It's a part. What would life even be like if we didn't have these sorts of longings and desires? It's hard to even figure out what it would look like. I think this is in part because of this thing that happens in the human heart. The way the heart is actually wired, and I would say wired by God. One of the guys I was reading this week he was an old preacher. He wrote a very famous sermon. His name is Thomas Chalmers. He said it like this: "There is a grasping tendency of the human heart." A grasping tendency. He didn't state that this was a bad thing necessarily. He just said this is the human heart. The human heart has a grasping tendency. In fact, he went so far as to say that this grasping tendency is something that the heart is so wired for, it's so natural, it's so much a normal part of our existence that it can't not be. Meaning the heart cannot stop grasping. The heart must fill its longing. It will always have desires. And those desires, we're not saying that they're good or bad. They're simply the normal way the heart works. We long. We desire things. And that desire explains why it seems so natural for us to clamor for, cling to, and attach ourselves to all of the stuff around us, because the heart really does long. It grasps. And in fact, it grasps such that it cannot allow itself to be empty. It cannot allow itself to be a wasteland or a wilderness. The heart will resist this. It hates a vacuum, and it will not allow itself not to cling. So I need just a couple of volunteers here. Andrew, you'd be great. That would be absolutely excellent. And I'm going to pick you two ladies as well. Come on right up. And I'm going to have Andrew come stand over here, and one of our ladies can come stand over here as well. You can pick which one. All right. And I'm going to have you stand here, Lois. All right. And so the scene is fairly straightforward here. We've got happy daisy picking girl over here, and you're just kind of looking off, and you're happy, and you're smiling, and yeah, see, you're perfect, you're excellent, that's great. So, and you're kind of enjoying life, and that's great. Now you two are sort of here. Let's switch you two up. You stand on this side, you stand on that side, and you guys are happy together. You're sort of exploring this little relationship couple thing. So you sort of face each other a little bit, but not that, like port like that, stay open so people can see your faces. All right, now you can hold hands there. So you guys are so sweet. It's like, So, and this is good because your heart is longing. and you have a desire for companionship, to find a soul. You got to be looking over here. You're happy. And smile. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see, that's it. So and this is good because this is a very sweet moment, and your heart is feeling satisfied. There's a longing fulfilled. There's a desire fulfilled, until the day you realize that this isn't really going to work out. So you kind of break, and so. Yeah, you see, naturally, you guys sort of just turn a little bit away. Now you got to frown, because now you got to frown. And this is what happens, because the heart hates a vacuum. The heart hates the fact that something that we've clung to, something that we desired is no longer ours. We wanted it, we needed it in order to be happy. And now that we don't have it, now something is taking place, and we're sad. Stop smirking. And we're kind of like sad, right? But now, what happens here when sad, handsome young man is turning away? And I'm sure there is happy Daisy Boy over here as well but you see, he smiles now, because suddenly what's happening? The heart is finding a new longing. It's finding something else, because the heart it must cling. There's a clinging tendency to the human heart. And so now you're smiling, and you start to sort of drift over. In fact, there's even a name for this. What's the name? It's the rebound, right? He's on the rebound, right? She becomes the rebound girl, right? We even have a terminology. And stop, you shouldn't make fun of the rebound. The rebound is an important part of dating. No, it's messed up. You guys, it's the only reason my wife even looked twice at me. Because I'm only kidding. Don't ask her. It's a joke. And you're going to ask her at first service. Someone's like, really? Was it rebound? Who was the rebound? It's a joke. We're not. So let's give them a round of, here, you guys you want a candy? You want a Snickers for your trouble? A little Snickers for your trouble? So, yeah, because the human heart clings. The human heart must, and so we satisfy itself. And you know what? Maybe it's not relationship to relationship, but you throw yourself into something. And when that something is dismantled, for whatever reason it is, you'll throw yourself into something else. And so you pursue your career, and you go after it with a vengeance, and something happens there, and you throw yourself into something else. And you know these serial hobbyists, they jump into one hobby, and their hearts get consumed by this one thing. And then when that's over, they jump into another thing, and they get consumed by that thing. You see, the heart clings. It has a grasping tendency. It's exceedingly important for us to know this about ourselves if we're to begin to unpack the reality of what goes on. All of these things, the Bible details as the things of this world. These longings that we have. It calls them the things of this world. Now, and if you look at verse 16, he says, "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world." We're going to unpack those three in a lot more detail next week. This is part one of this message. Part two next week, we're going to drill into these three, and we're going to tie it to the garden and the temptation that Adam and Eve first faced, as well as the temptation of Jesus. So we're going to try to work through some of those connections that might even exist there next week as we kind of explode some of these ideas a little bit further. Now, but for our purposes, it's just, for today, it'll suffice for us to think about this longing, this craving, this desire. We use lots of words for it, lots of words. Love and lust and covetousness. We talk about envy and jealousy. If we were to be precise, if I were to give kind of a little bit more definition to these things, we use a lot of these words interchangeably. But if we were to be a little bit more precise, we might think of envy as a desire that we have for the good things that other people experience or have. We see the blessings they have, and we want them for ourselves. That would be envy. Envy doesn't mean that they have to do without. You don't want your neighbor's car. You want one just a little better. That's envy. Now, if you really do want them not to have it, you've left envy behind and moved into malice. That's a deeper and even darker state of the human heart, and we'll all admit that sometimes we even experience that. But envy is that longing, it's that desire, and it could be for anything. Their wealth, their stuff, anything like that. Jealousy is maybe a little bit more precisely used in terms of relationships. and also in terms of less of simply wanting what someone else has, but more so of jealousy is the fear of losing something that is rightly yours, or at least perceived to be yours. That's why when we talk of relationships, it's like he's jealous. Usually means he's jealous because he fears losing her to someone else. It's not exactly envy, but we often use these terms interchangeably. But so for the purposes, if I'm using jealousy or envy, I might use them more like envy for the purposes of these two messages. But there's a little bit of a distinction between them. That's also why jealousy can be considered a good thing. Why God can be a jealous God, because it's actually a longing to protect what is rightly yours. A jealous husband may not be a bad thing. It could be a horribly wrong thing, but it need not be a bad thing. So there's a little bit of play on those words. Whereas with envy, there's very little good or redeeming that can come out of this, because we're simply longing for the stuff, abilities, skills, whatever it might be, of the people around us. Again, all of these things are called the desires for the things of this world by John. Now, John points out in the second part of verse 15, if anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Because the heart can only have one dominant desire. It can only have one dominant desire. Whatever it is that you will throw yourself into, whatever pursuit it is, will be the defining one for the rest of your life, for all of the other details, not just duration, but for the fullness of your life. Everything else in your life will be shaped by that one dominant love. If it's for your kids to succeed, then the rest of life will be defined. If it's for wealth or status, the rest of your life will be defined. If it is a single-eyed focus on your Creator, then everything else will also flow from that. And they cannot coexist. You will have one dominant desire, and it will either be for God or it will be for one of the desires of this world. When John talks about this in 2:17, verse 17, he explains why this is foolishness. The world and its desires pass away. They pass away. I think when he's talking about this, he's really hitting this idea that they're transient. I think that's the kind of the first point to understand. They're transient. All of these things that we long for, all of the, especially the stuff around us, they're never going to stand the test of time. How foolish is it for us to invest ourselves and pursue all of these things with such reckless abandon when in 100 years it will all be irrelevant? It will all be gone. They will all have passed away. They're transient. They're temporal. They're not eternal. And if you invest yourselves in temporal things, what good is this? How is this going to reward you in the end? They're gone. They've rusted and they've been destroyed, and the moths have come in and eaten them. And this is what the scriptures talk about time and time and time again. They're temporal. They're going to pass away. How will this make for a smart decision? This is why it's such a futility in our thinking, a foolishness. There's also another way, though. The idea that he's communicating is that they're already passing away. I don't think he's just promising us that they will pass away. I think he's saying, even now, in this very moment, they're passing away. They've already begun the inevitable decay. And I think we get hints about this in other parts of the scriptures. You remember the teacher, Solomon, was writing about all of his exploits, all of the great things he tried to do, his building campaigns and his pursuit of, his sexual pursuits and his pursuit of wealth beyond imagine. And all of them, he said, were meaningless. They became just completely a waste of his time. Really? How come? Because these things have begun already to pass away. In the world of addiction, we see this maybe a little bit more concretely. So you get your first drink, you get your buzz. That buzz gives you what you needed, your escapist moment. But of course, next time you go back to the bottle, the buzz doesn't cut it. The one drink doesn't cut it. So you go for 2, and then maybe 3. There's a sort of diminishing return on the delight. The delight itself is decaying to the point where you become an addict that is simply a slave to the habit, a slave to the desire, with no resultant good. You think about it in any category of life. how many times I've heard incredibly wealthy people talk about the struggles they have with money. Are you kidding me? You're 10 times wealthier than anyone I've ever known. You know, whenever I hear myself whining about my lot in life, I'm like, really? By world standards, I'm the 1%. How in the world can I be frustrated or upset by this? How can I have abundance of resources and what? I got to pick between my cable packages? I can't get the one I really want? I mean, what happens? We consume, we go after, we desire, we long for, and we get a little bit of a buzz, and then that buzz no longer satisfies, so we need a little bit more. Psychologists tell us in the area of pornography, what they often see is a spiral downward. It starts with just straight porn, and then it starts to devolve, and it becomes, if these desires are satiated, they become increasingly perverse. Increasingly. Such that you get less of a thrill out of it as you go deeper in. So you go deeper and deeper looking for the same thrill. How come? These things are passing away. There's it's been described as a sort of tastelessness. The same author that I was talking about, Thomas Chalmers, he says, they have been plied with delights of sense and splendor, even to weariness. You have been plied with delights of sense and splendor, even to weariness. The very multitude of their enjoyments has at last extinguished their power of enjoyment. I think these things are beginning to pass away. They say that if you were to satisfy every one of your sexual urges, that it would take increasingly aggressive sexuality for you to experience the same type of enjoyment. And I know what some of you are thinking. I would like to test that theory. But isn't that the promise? These delights of this world, they're delights for a reason. We have to understand that they have a power. They allure us. They draw us in. They are delights. But these delights will not deliver because they are, in fact, passing away. If you take a look here at verse 17, the world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Whoever does the will of God lives forever. When I come across a verse like this, I get a little bit, the will of God sounds like simply the obedience that you ought to do. So here John is talking about desires, and then he throws in this will of God idea. And it can get a little bit confusing for us. But you see, when the scriptures talk about the will of God, this is why I phrased it a little bit more precisely, desiring the desires of God. See, you desiring the will of God is so key. Because it's the will of God, when you desire the will of God, when you want the will of God, then we begin to see envy take a back seat. We begin to crave him and his desires. The message that the sermon that I was quoting from, it's called the expulsive power of a new affection. It's this desires that when a better desire comes and replaces an old desire, it just pushes out the junk. And therein we see the great secret. I'm going to show you. Do we have any Snickers fans? Really like avid Snickers kinds of people? Who loves Snickers? There we go. We got a couple Snickers guys over here. And can't really exactly see. You guys love, these are the Snickers. These are the Snicker minis over here. All right. We got a little Snicker lover here. We got a couple of Snicker lovers back there, right? Because Snickers are like God's, the elixir of the gods, right? It's like ambrosia. It's just one of these spectacular things. Now, I can decide, all right, Conrad, sorry, someone heads up. Sorry. So, lucky it was a mini. The mini is fantastic. Now, if I decided that before you dig into these things, that I want your mini back. If I said to you, all right, listen, now you got it, now it's yours, I want it back. There's like this sense of, why would you do that? You're just messing with us. It's mind games, bully pulpit, that kind of a thing. But you're saying, well, why? Come on. Now, if I really wanted it back, I could simply take it from you. I could wrestle you. I don't know if I could take Christine. I see your mini there. Maybe if I'm quick, I can get it. The kids I can take. I wrestle you to the ground, I sit on your chest, I take the mini out of your hand, and, I wrench it from you. But if you were really clinging to this desire, if you were really longing for it, this is nothing but destructive. This is damaging. This is dangerous. And you feel deprived. You feel like something has been ripped from you because, of course, it has been. But, of course, if I say to you, can I have your mini, and in exchange I'll give you a fun size? See that? That's right. You see, that makes sense now because you're saying to me, I want the fun size. Where's the mini? Oh, you got it? All right. There you go. You see? This is easy to get my minis back when I'm offering you something better. Because now you say, oh, look, that's the expulsive power of a new affection. I've given you something that you really did long for and that you really did want, you really did need. And when I give you a desire that is better than the desires of this world, you see, because really what God's saying, by the way, fun size, really? Why would they call that the fun size? That's not mis-advertising, marketing. That's not the fun size. That's the fun size. You know? You see? Because what God is really saying is you're settling for minis. You're settling for these cheap delights of the world. You're settling for stuff that is not going to last. It's not going to be satisfying. It's going to be these kinds of things that are nibbling away at your soul, that are diminishing returns. They're not really giving you what you really want. And God is saying, I got the king-size bar for you. I've got the one that really is what your heart desires. And if we could learn to crave him fully and completely with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, then it's the rest of these delights, they fade away. They pass out of our lives. They really do pass away for us. Now, the one caveat I want to leave you with is that if that were the case, if that were all that was to it, then we would be in great shape because we could begin to see this and experience and know it. The problem comes in that to really desire his desires means we've got to embrace his will for us. Remember, it's the will of God that John talks about. But what is God's will for you? When it comes to envy, the Christian has to get to a place. Not anyone if you're not a Christian, then this doesn't make sense to you. But if you're a follower of Christ, then you've got to begin to see that what you lack is not simply an indictment of the people around you. You can't simply compare yourself to the people around you. If you lack something, it's because God has deprived you. And you start to get this idea that God owes me. He must come through for me. He's got to provide contentment to me. He's got to provide relationship for me. He's got to provide more stuff for me to enjoy. So your problem isn't really with the people around you. You can redirect all of this. You don't have to envy the people around you because if you're a follower of Christ and you have a God who is all powerful and all good, then the place he has you is his will. And if that is true, trying to understand your part in that place where the good God really does have you here and embrace his will for you, that's a challenge. But as you begin to do this, as you begin to have your heart filled with a longing for him, a desire for him in worship and prayer and study, if you see your heart move in this way, and then you forget your competition with the people around you, but instead take your cause right to God and recognize that his will for you is good, that he is a good God. And if he has you here and this is where he wants you, then this is right. You do these things and you'll start to see the sting of envy lessen. You'll start to see it seep out, oozing out of your heart a little bit more each time. Would you pray with me? Lord, we're asking that you would fill us up with a fullness of the knowledge of your great love for us. May our hearts desire you and your desires. May we be content with all that you have. In fact, more than that, may we delight ourselves in your delights. And may the delights of this world that are ruining our souls, may they fade into oblivion. In Christ's name, amen.